My name is Ginette Lamontagne. I am past president of the McGill University Retiree Association, and I have the pleasure today to introduce our speaker. Um, Dr. Shonk graduated in medicine in 1970 from the University of Western Ontario and established a family medicine practice in Kitchener-Waterloo for 48 years. Uh, in medical school, he was particularly interested in pediatrics and palliative care, the beginning and the end of life. His interest in humor sparked in 1988. Since then, he has been spreading the message of laughter to over 1,000 audiences. Dr. Shonk, has developed the humor project called Jokes on Spokes. A TV and comedy DVDs are on a cart that is brought to patients' rooms. He also wrote a novel during the pandemic titled Laughter from Womb to Tomb, an information book about humor. Dr. Shonk is a motivational speaker on humor and wellness. He believes that laughter is a universal uniter. He will inform you on the medicine and the science behind laughter and its gender differences. So welcome to Dr. Shonk.
Thank you, Jeanette. I'm going to see if I can clip this on and if you can still hear me. Clip it on my mustache, maybe. You still hear me all right? Okay. Good afternoon, fellow retirees and experienced individuals. Sounds weird, but it reminds me of the 80-year-old woman who wandered down the street with a t-shirt that said, "I am not 80 years old. I am sweet 16 with 64 years of experience." And I like to use the word experience because I think you probably would agree with me, at least in North American society, the word senior, older, elder, geriatric has somehow picked up a negative connotation, hasn't it? The word experience at least says that you have some wisdom to pass on. John Dewey was an American philosopher who said, "It is possible to be playful and serious at the same time." And in fact, it represents the ideal mental condition. I've done enough speaking and reading about it. They say if you're speaking, you should have some humor in the first 90 seconds to relax the speaker, who may be anxious, and the audience, who may be wondering, what the heck's going on here? One of my favorite stories was told to me by one of my patients, but a woman stopped on the 401 for speeding. Very serious OPP constable's writing her a ticket. And he looks in her eyes and he said, "My goodness, your eyes are red. Have you been drinking as well as speeding?" He looks him in the eye and says, "My goodness, your eyes are glazed if you had a donut." That would either get you 4 more tickets or get out of here. I live in New Hamburg and I had a terrible tragedy recently. I've been banned from shopping at Sobeys. I was checking out with the cashier and she said, "Strip down facing me," and I didn't know she was talking about my credit card. Can't go back to Sobeys. Also, I wonder if you know that even some of I hope you can relate to these because I can, some hits from the 60s that have aged as well. Herman's Hermits. Mrs. Brown, you have a lovely walker. The Commodores. Once, twice, 3 times to the bathroom. I bet you some of the guys can relate to that. Leo Sayer, you make me feel like napping. You've just had lunch and some of you may want to snooze here. And one of my favorite groups was ABBA. They have a new one out called Denture Queen. So we can even age the hits past. Second part of all this, so number 1 is to have fun. Number 2, serious part, where we'll talk briefly about the science of laughter and humor. and there's a fair bit of it out there now. And thirdly, I want to also make some concrete suggestions about what you can do to bring more laughter, play, and joy into your own lives. It's often been called a mirthful message or a chuckles checkup. And certainly over COVID, our chucklers got somewhat rusted. I'm sure also I wanted to mention some of you may have watched me moving up here. I'm not the swiftest person in the block. I have had a chronic neurological condition for 36 years now with a wonderful name called chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyradiculopathy. It doesn't fit on the Scrabble board. I also had the pleasure 36 years ago of being presented on a hospital bed to grand neurology rounds at my own university as the patient instead of as a student. And it's different from that side of the bed, isn't it, folks? Anybody who's done it. And I think maybe it's made me somewhat better as a physician, realizing what it's like from that side. I'm also asked, how did I clue into all this? I can remember one of those aha moments about 30 odd years ago, a week before Christmas. I was having a bad day in the office. I was behind. I had a headache. I walked into an examining room to find a mother with her 6-year-old son. He'd been up all night with an earache, and he was not a happy camper. And I had to wrestle with him and cajole him, and I finally got a look in his ears. But I knew he was upset. So I turned to him and I said, "Now, what did you ask Santa for Christmas next week?" He looked me straight in the eye and said, "A new doctor." I laughed. His mother laughed. He laughed. I went to write up his chart and thought, my headache's bitter. I'm going to make it through the rest of the day. That spontaneous laugh changed my mood completely. Milton Berle said, laughter is like an instant vacation. And if we allow it, it can do that. My patients also knew that they could play with me. Near my retirement, walked into an examining room to find a gentleman already stretched out my examining room table. He'd taken the white sheet we provided and pulled it right over his body, and he'd brought in a sign he'd made up that he'd stuck on his chest that said, "Too late." And I can tell you, he got an extra 20 minutes out of me that day. And as Matt mentioned, laughter is a universal uniter. Take some humor into your doctors. Instead of a rash, a headache, a back pain, you'll be a human being. Two humans that share a laugh are equal. They are not doctor and patient, boss and employee, royalty and peasant. They are equal human beings. And you will get better medical care. Humor and perspective. William James, I'm sure some of you are familiar with, he's described as the Freud of North America. He said that the greatest discovery of my generation is that a person can alter their life by altering their attitude. He also said we don't laugh because we're happy because we laugh. And one of the best examples I picked up looking at the same problem from different angles. Comic strip. Two experienced gentlemen on a park bench. One of them turned to the other and said, "This aging is awful. I ache all over." The other one laughed and laughed and laughed. He said, "I feel like a newborn. I have no hair, no teeth, and I just peed my pants." Two of them looking at exactly the same problem from different angles. I also believe that if you can take something that's bothering you and find some humor in it, it no longer controls you. You take some control back. Allows me to tell you about the 95-year-old gentleman who streaked naked through the flower show, got first prize for best dried arrangement. There's a bit of a visual there, and it's not pretty, but I heard a 104-year-old lady interviewed recently on radio. And they said, "What's good about being 104? She said, "No peer pressure." I like that lady. I had a patient, one of my favorites, a Scotchman, who always had a story for me. I remember walking in the examining room one day and I said, "Well, what's the problem today?" He said, "Well, doc, lately my sex drive is too high." I said, "Wait a minute, how young are you?" He said, "I'm 82. I said, "Your sex drive's too high?" He said, "Yep, doc, lately it's all been in my head. I want you to lower it 3 feet." He'd been waiting to get me with that. And I can tell you, in the last days of his life in hospital, there were nurses that would work a 12-hour shift, go put their coat on, and go and spend half hour at his bedside on their own time because he was so much fun to be around. I also like to tell about the experienced gentleman who came into the doctor with a sore ear. And of course, the doctor looked in his ear and pulled out a Gravol suppository. And he said, "What on earth are you doing with a suppository in your ear?" He said, now I know where my missing hearing aid is. It's a bit of a crappy story, but I kind of like it. Children, story of the 5-year-old granddaughter that turned to her grandmother and said, "How old are you, Grandma?" She said, "Well, I'm 78, dear." She said, the granddaughter said, "Did you start at what?" That's how kids look at things. Now, I don't necessarily expect you to believe me. What have some other people said about much more famous? We can go right back to ancient Greece. Socrates said that life should be lived as play. One of the very most famous Canadian physicians, William Osler, said that laughter is the music of life, commenting on its importance. Jenny Banks, a bit of a character, she said, laughter will help inoculate you against the grumps and will decrease the number of skull movements you have each day. Michael Pritchard, a comedian, said laughter is like manure to a farmer. It doesn't do any good until you spread it around. I did work on a dairy farm as a teenager, and I learned quickly that you don't spread manure with a strong wind at your back. Henry Ward Beecher also said, a person without a sense of humor is like a wagon without springs, jolted by every pebble in the road. I believe that our sense of humor is our natural built-in shock absorber. Going down that road of life, you meet a pothole, you meet a tree branch, you meet a quick right turn, left turn. You may have to go to plan B, plan C. And sometimes it's your sense of humor that will help get you over that. I'm going to start the PowerPoint now. This has gone off. I apologize for the audio, but hopefully you'll be able to hear this well enough. The smile. Can anybody convince me that that infant was taught how to smile? Nope. It's hardwired. The ability to smile is there from birth. And most smiles, if you think about it, are started by another smile. We all smile in the same language. You can identify, Phyllis Diller said, a smile is a curve that sets everything straight. And William Arthur Ward said, a warm smile is the universal language of kindness. And anatomically, it takes 17 muscles to smile and 43 muscles to scowl. So it takes much less effort to smile than it does to scowl. Now, they also describe a smile is a laugh that has exploded. What I would like you to do is think about how you feel when you have a good laugh. This is Dr. Annette Goodhart. I just play this for an hour. Get comfortable.
I'm not going to tell you what I'm thinking about.
How do you feel after a good laugh? Mellow, relaxed, compassionate, good listener. I realized that if I could have a quick little laugh before I walked in to see every patient, I would be better at what I do because it got rid of any frustrations, anxiety, tensions that I was under. How far back does laughter go? We share 98.7% of our DNA with the chimpanzees. So I think we can honestly say that our ability to laugh goes back millions of years. The quads. Again, can anybody convince me that those infants were taught how to laugh? Hardwired in the brain. Dr. Clifford Kuhn, a psychiatrist, has broken down laughter into 16 different stages. A smirk, a smile, a grin, a snicker, a titter, a giggle, a chuckle, a chortle. A laugh, a cackle, a guffaw, a howl, a shriek, a roar, convulse, and die. Hopefully we won't get to the last two stages here today. Laughter is the primary outer manifestation of joy. And David Brooks, in his book, The Second Mountain, broke down joy into four different groups. First, he described as physical, and his example was people marching in a parade. His second is collective effervescence. His example was people dancing at the celebration of a wedding. The third is emotional. And I delivered well over 1,000 babies, and I got to see this over 1,000 times. It's that moment when you take the newborn baby and put it on the mother's chest. I encourage the husbands to be there or the significant others. And that moment, you can't repeat it. It's a moment of absolute joy, and it is emotional. And the final one is spiritual. It is usually involved with nature. You don't get a spiritual moment in a traffic jam on the 401. Example of this I can give you quite a few years ago, a canoe trip with my wife and my two son-in-laws, believe it or not, because my two daughters had new babies. And in the evening, I took my wife out in the canoe to look at the stars, and we looked up, and there was the aurora borealis. And this happened to be the exact day of our 35th wedding anniversary. And of course, I said, "See what I arranged for you?" You didn't buy it. But the spiritual moments are often with nature. And I've had maybe half a dozen of those because I've done a lot of canoeing and been up in the Arctic. Remember doing this as a kid? Absolute fun and joy, jumping into a pile of leaves. This next one is not necessarily funny, but it is inspiring, and I bet you some of you will say, "Ah." I don't know whether he was asking to get married or what there. I'm not sure. When we talk about joy, and I have given to Ron a list of some of these, I would highly recommend this. Mission Joy. It's on Netflix now, Finding Happiness in Troubled Times. It is a playful interaction between Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama, dictated in 2015, or at least done in 2015. It is full of laughter, giggles, and wisdom. These two act like 6 or 7-year-olds. They touch each other, they giggle, they laugh, but they also pass on an awful lot of wisdom. So there is an hour that you can find some happiness. Mirror neurons. With the functional MRIs now, we're able to find out how the brain works. You know, when you're in a group and somebody yawns, what happens to you? You yawn. They smile, you smile. They scowl, you may scowl. We now know that these mirror neurons in the brain pick up the facial features of the people you're with within milliseconds. And the motor neurons that control your facial features are right beside them, so that copied feelings lead to copied actions. May get some reaction with this one. Dear Lord, please don't let Brussels sprouts be part of the cure of COVID-19 virus. Just because illness enters our lives does not mean joy has to exit. Obviously, I'm in your demographic, and I know there are people here who probably got hip replacements, knee replacements, coronary bypass, diabetes, you name it. But that doesn't mean all joy has to lead to life. I thought growing old would take longer. This next one is one of my favorites. I hope you like it as well. Whatever happened to our sexual relations? I don't know. I don't even think we got a Christmas card from them this year. Retirement advantages. How many days in a week? 6 Saturdays and 1 Sunday. When is a retiree's bedtime? 2 hours after he falls asleep on the couch. And among retirees, what is considered formal attire? Tied shoes. And here's grandma deciding to unfriend someone. I'm not sure that's going to work, grandma. Humor and religion. Sign in front of a church, First Baptist Church, Reverend John Smith, 9 a.m. service, Jesus walks on water. 11 a.m. service, searching for Jesus. I'm not sure they saw the humor in it, but. And here's another one I like. Again, ask kids questions. A pastor giving a children's sermon on vestments asked, "Why do you think I wear this collar?" One kid answered, "Because it kills ticks and fleas up to 30 days. I recently talked to a Catholic women's group, and there was a priest there, and he came up to me after and says, "My collar is good for 60 days. I took this picture myself. He who farts in church sits in his own pew. St. James Lutheran Church in Mannheim between Baden and Kitchener. This church is actually for sale right now. And here is a Catholic church with a sense of humor. Someone sent me this. Staying in bed shouting, "Oh God," does not constitute going to church. Galveston, Houston, Texas. Now, there are some people that get annoyed when we put humor and religion together. But I should mention to you that the Quran states he deserves paradise who makes his companions laugh. The Talmud states that goodwill is the mightiest practical force in the universe. And the Bible, Proverbs 17 and 22, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine, a broken spirit drieth the bones. 3 religions recognizing the value of laughter. What soap is to the body, laughter is to the soul. We know that soap washes the dirt and the grime and the sweat off your body. I believe that laughter washes the anxiety, tension, depression out of your soul. Notice on an obstetrical floor bulletin board, the first 5 minutes of life are very traumatic. Someone added a PS, the last 5 minutes ain't so hot either. And I have friends that know me, and one of them saw this, a funeral home in Buffalo, and took a picture of it. It's the Am I Gone Funeral Home. Seems appropriate, doesn't it, eh? And here is a gentleman with a sense of humor. In his will, he'd written, "At my funeral, take the bouquet off my coffin and throw it to the crowd to see who's next." Want to fight for that one, folks? A little more serious. Be thankful for the bad things in life, for they open your eyes to the good things you weren't paying attention to before. And I've had examples of that in my medical practice. One gentleman who came in and said, "You know, doc, this cancer is the best thing that ever happened to me." He said, "I've prioritized my life. I was a workaholic, and I now realize wrong, wrong, wrong. Family, friends, etc. should be important." These are excuse notes written by parents to their children's teachers. "Dear school, please excuse John being absent on January 28, 29, 30, 31st, 32nd, and 33rd. Please excuse Ray Friday. He had very loose vowels." And this last one is an image. "Please excuse Tom being yesterday. He had diarrhea and his boots leaked." You think maybe Tom gets a couple days off? I think maybe he does. Now, we as physicians are not immune to these kind of things. These are actual comments that got typed up in hospital reports. Patient was shot in the head with a .32 caliber rifle. Chief complaint, headache. Dictated, patient had a pap smear today. Transcribed, patient had a pap smear today. And this last one I really like. Dictated, rectal examination disclosed a normal-sized thyroid. Since the thyroid is a gland in your neck, that's one hell of a rectal, one hell of a finger. My male patients who did not like having their prostate checked, I would tell them, "I tell you what, I'll use 2 fingers and give you a second opinion." They were relaxed. Definition of humor from Nancy Sullivan. Humor is perspective. It gives you the ability to separate the situation from the self. The situation should be taken seriously. The self is separate and should be taken lightly. Clive James also said, common sense and sense of humor are really the same thing, moving at different speeds. Sense of humor is common sense dancing. I had a beautiful example of this quite a few years ago. I came home from work one day and I got that question that you often get from my wife. She said, how did your day go? I said, well, actually, I happened to be involved in a cardiac arrest this morning at the hospital, and we did manage to save a gentleman's life. She said, that's wonderful, dear. Now take out the garbage. Yeah, nice you can do CPR, but the garbage isn't going to walk out by itself, dummy. Humor also has been classified in different groups. There's many more than this, but these are the ones that I'm most familiar with. First is that of spontaneous wit. These are the people that think of that one-liner that you and I think of next week. One of the best examples I can think of this, one of the human seminars that I was at, one of the speakers told a true story of being at a speaker in the States, 400 people in the audience. The MC was up on a raised podium like this, introducing the guest speaker, who was on the floor with a handheld microphone ready to go. He leapt up on the stage and missed the top step and did a face plant in front of 400 people. He didn't get up. He looked out at the audience and said, I'll now take questions from the floor. I might think of that a week later if I was lucky. Humor Aikido. Aikido is Japanese martial arts, the way of harmonious spirit, a little more subtle. I can best give you an example from my own childhood. My parents were quite playful. My father traveled a bit. He came back from a business trip in the States, and he had quite a good-sized bruise on his arm. And he flaunted this in front of my mother for several days. Finally, she said, all right, where did you get the bruise? He said, oh, that was the blonde in Baltimore. She bit me in a moment of violent passion. My mother said, you mean at your age you got one with teeth? He had to come up with a new line. Third is that of embarrassment. And again, speaking right through the age group, teenagers hate to be embarrassed. What happens to your embarrassing moments as you age? They become smileys. They become things that you tell your friends about. Again, an example of this, I picked up after one of my talks to a rural group. One of the farm wives came up and said, Doc, I got a story for you. Said, my husband and I, a while ago, were out at a fairly formal dinner one night. Halfway through the dinner, the husband wasn't feeling well, and he nipped out to the washroom. Well, unfortunately, he had a bit of diarrhea, and he didn't quite make it to the can. He is standing there with his anointed underwear thinking, what am I going to do now? We guys are very resourceful. Pulls his pants on, rolls the underwear up, puts it in his pocket, and goes back out to finish dinner. That's what you do, guys, right? No problem. They get home that night, and the wife is watching him undress. And she said, where is your underwear? He explained, oh, little accident there. But, I'm a cool guy, pants on, underwear in pocket. And when I got out to the table and no one was looking, I just discreetly slipped them into your purse. She said, dear, I did not take a purse tonight. Some woman got home that night, opened her purse. Boy, I scared the crap out of some guy tonight. So the more embarrassing your moments are, the more likely to be laughing about it later on. Fourth is that of ridicule or toxic humor. This is humor that's hurtful. Laughing with people leaves them with a whole self-esteem. Laughing at them leaves them with a hole in their self-esteem. So we try not to use this. Parody is using humor to instruct. And I can guess give you the best example of this from my own medical background. One of the pediatricians became a good friend, told me a true story on call one night, pediatric group, at 4 a.m. in the morning, an urgent call from a mother. Well, you'd hope maybe it was a kid with severe asthma or croup. This mother's urgent problem at 4 a.m. was whether she could start her 4-month-old on vegetables. He was very polite, answered her questions, didn't say anything. But what he did do was, the next night, he set his alarm for 4 a.m., got up and phoned her back and said, I was thinking about your call the other night. You can start meats too. Can't fault him, can you? I've thrown in a new one, puns. They're often described as the lowest form of humor. But then poetry is verse. Don't worry about that. They're groaners. Finland has just closed their borders. No one will be crossing the finish line. Oh. Physiology of laughter. Physiology of laughter. What happened to him? Boom, he fell over. You cannot contract your skeletal muscles and laugh mirthfully at the same time. It is physiologically impossible. Mirthful laughter is a very powerful muscle relaxant. We now again mention functional MRIs, studies out of Dartmouth and Stanford in the States. What they did was have people laughing and actually do functional MRIs to find out what parts of the brain were working. Small studies, more of them have been done lately. A couple of interesting things have come out with this, three major ones. Number one is the area of the brain, the neocortex, that interprets the humor is separate from the part of the brain that decides whether it's funny or not, which is in the cingulate ganglia. It is the nucleus accumbens that lights up. It's the same area that lights up when drug addicts are high. And they found a gender difference. Women access their memory and language areas before deciding to laugh. May explain why women are not big fans of slapstick humor. Stanley Chan and Lee Burke in Loma Linda, California, have done some biochemical experiments on laughter. I'm sure if you all go back to your high school biology, remember the fight-fright mechanism, where if you're frightened, your cortisol levels go up, your blood pressure goes up, your pulse goes up, your muscles tense up. They want to know what happened when you laugh. And this is studying the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis system. What they found was that serum cortisol levels go down with mirthful laughter. They go up with the frightening. They also found that mirthful laughter boosted the immune system, natural killer cell activity, IgA, IgM, all went up and stayed up for several days after having a good laugh. Endorphin levels also went up. Endorphins are the body's natural painkiller. And endorphins have been said to be more powerful than morphine at relieving pain. So there are biochemical explanations now for why you feel good after a good laugh. Principle of inverse paranoia. One should proceed through each day looking for the good that is all around us. How do you read this next slide? Opportunity is now here or opportunity is nowhere. It may depend on your state of mind. Children, you bring them into the world and they drive you out of it. Balzac. I don't have to tell this group how quickly grandchildren and children grow up. This is a shot of 8 of my grandchildren about 13 years ago. And this is a shot last August, what's happened to them on a family trip to the Yukon in Whitehorse. I might also tell this group, worrying about holidays all these days, stay in Canada. We had a week in Whitehorse, 20 to 25 degrees, not a drop of rain. We have a lot of biologists in the family. They had a really good time. I wasn't, sure about the cost of it, but the 16-year-old stood there at 1 o'clock in the morning looking at the aurora borealis saying, I had no idea the world was this beautiful. Yes, it was worth it. You'll remember that. I like this slide too. The difference between a big sister and a big brother.
I want to show you how easy it is to 10x your crypto investment. You're going to send me a grant, and tomorrow you'll...
No, we won't. I'm sure because these are retirees from the university, we have a bunch of teachers, but I put this in anyway. I'm not worried. If I'm not smart enough to get a good job, I can always teach. Wow. I put it in for a reason, though. Half my family are teachers. But Ethel Barrymore said, you reach full maturity the first time you have a really good laugh at yourself. Think about that. If you can laugh at yourself, you are comfortable with who you are. And it is a very, very positive psychological state. For the last 30 years, all you've done is find mistakes in anything I say. 31 years. That resonate to some of you guys? What is healthy humor? It follows the benign violation theory. It's humor that violates what is normal or expected, but it does not suggest violence or emotional distress. And unfortunately, especially in politics these days, we seem to have lost that. It should also be AT&T, appropriate, timely, and tactful. How do you handle toxic humor? You're assertive enough, tell them you don't like it and why you don't like it. Give them no reaction, because they're expecting a reaction. Ask them to explain the joke. That'll kill it. Walk away. African proverb, the axe forgets, the tree remembers. You don't have to blow out my candle to make your candle glow brighter. So how's your day going so far? Little bit of a cleanup, maybe? Well, we're all set to do a cleanup, though, as well, with this next one. This is a gentleman with a septic tank painted, stool bus. I kind of like that one. See, on the electric fence, they said. It will be fun, they said. I did have to string electric fence when I worked on the dairy farm, and the boss and I always argued over who was going to test it, but I didn't test it by peeing on it. How do you bring more joy and happiness into your lives? Several studies have shown that you do have control about 40% of your happiness level. This means that we have a chance to improve it. How can you do this? This is the suggestion part I'm going to get into. First off is something called forest bathing. Came out of Japan, 1988. Shinrin Yoko. It involves going into the forest and using all 5 of your senses, and we'll describe that in a moment. They've also done biochemical experiments to find that trees and plants release phytonucleosides. They're volatile organic compounds, and they have antimicrobial and antifungal properties. And when breathed by humans, they actually stimulate natural killer cells. So your immune system gets a boost by going into the woods. And the forest bathing involves going into the woods and just concentrating on each of your senses separately. Closing your eyes, just listening. Opening your eyes, looking at all the different colors and hues. Taking a big breath in, taking in the smell of the composting, the coniferous trees. Touching the bark, picking up some leaves, doing it and consciously spending it. Happiness chemicals and how to get them. We also now know that specific human behaviors and actions will stimulate neurotransmitters that make you happy. Specifically, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. Dopamine is called the reward chemical. You get this after having your lunch or that first spoonful of the hot fudge sundae, you'll get a hit of dopamine. If you're a list maker, as you check off things on that list, hit a dopamine again. You get a good night's sleep, you get a hit of dopamine. Having a bath or a shower will also give you a hit of dopamine. Unfortunately, the online gamblers and the bettors know this as well. So they let them win just enough to keep them going. Oxytocin is the love hormone. It is stimulated by socializing, which is exactly what you people are doing through this whole conference. And very strongly, it releases oxytocin. Physical touch, holding hands, or it may explain why physiotherapy, massage therapy, chiropractic treatment is effective. It's an actual laying on of hands. Petting animals will give you a hit of oxytocin. And altruism, volunteer work, that shift you do at the food bank will get you a hit of oxytocin as well. Serotonin is the mood stabilizer, and this is mainly with nature, sun exposure, nature walks, mindfulness, Tai Chi and yoga. And endorphins, we've already mentioned, are increased by laughing, exercise, listening to music. For this group, I might suggest that you take a significant other, a child or a grandchild for a walk, sunshine, go into the woods, hold their hand, sing a song, tell a joke, sit down, have a snack, do some forest bathing, and you will hit about a dozen of these. And you're going to feel pretty darn good. The healing benefits of laughter. This is the work of Rod Martin, who was here at Waterloo. I think he's at Western, my alma mater now, PhD psychologist. It's an academic book. What he did was take all the anecdotal things about laughter and test them, do a baseline and have the subjects laugh and then retest. And what he found was the following. It reduced stress. It boosts the immune system. We mentioned that. It relieves pain by increasing endorphins. It decreases anxiety. It stabilizes the mood. It rests the brain. It enhances communication. It inspires creativity. There is a connection between ha-ha and aha because you're most relaxed in that state. It maintains hope and it bolsters morale. So it's a pretty impressive list when you look at it. Adding vitamin H to your day. Fake it until you make it. You ever stood in front of a mirror and start to giggle? Way you go. Body doesn't know the difference. Get the same effect. Play with your pets. Newspaper, just read the comics. My wife and I are beginning to identify more and more with pickles. Contact your laughter buddy. Everybody should have a laughter buddy. That person you know that will make you smile and laugh. Phone them. Go see them. Zoom them. FaceTime them when you're feeling down so that you know you'll feel better. Take time out from your devices. Utilize a humor first aid kit. Have some of your favorite cartoons, things that remind you of your favorite things, funny things, and utilize it when you're feeling down. Play with a child. Watch more comedy movies. Do the forced bathing. Keep one of these handy. I try to keep one of these handy. It's kind of difficult to be serious talking to somebody with a red nose on. A fellow that did an experiment a while ago stood on the busy corner in New York at rush hour with a red nose on. 4 types of people. Number 1 were the people on their phones who walked by and didn't even notice the red nose. Some of the people that walked by that were in a foul mood and looked at them and said, growled at them because they were happy and they weren't. Then there were the people that came up to them and said, did you know you had a red nose? And then there were the people that said, good on ya. So it's something just to remember. And I used to keep all the Herman cartoon books, Calvin and Hobbes and The Far Side, in my examining rooms. And it was not unusual for me to walk in to find patients giggling, looking at Herman cartoons. And one gentleman, I said, what's the problem today? And he said, well, doc, I came in depressed, but I feel better already. Thank you, Herman. Also had children's joke books. You'd walk in and there'd be a child reading their jokes to the mother or the father, relating. It made a big difference, I hope. Reading can seriously damage your ignorance. I would highly recommend this. The Good Life by Robert Waldinger and Mark.
Para is the IT painkiller. Remote monitoring and management, remote access, help desk and ticketing, smart automations, patching, software deployment, scripting. And the amazing thing is that it does all this while still being easy to use.
They compared 400 Harvard with 40
You know who's calling?
young fellas.
The caller sounds exactly like your sister. You're sure it's her. She says she's in trouble and needs you to send money fast. But is it really her? Artificial intelligence or AI can imitate anyone's voice. Protect yourself from fake voice scams. If someone says they're a family member in trouble, verify who they are. Consider having a special word only your family knows. Or ask the caller a question only the real person.
He is a research social psychologist. And what he's done is analyze the Gen Z, which is the generation of kids from born 95 on, which includes all 9 of my grandchildren. And it is very well documented. It is his bibliography and references about 400 pages. Some of the studies include 25,000 from Australia, UK, Canada, the States. And what he shows is the graphs and what's happened with the advent of cell phones in 2010. Anxiety, depression, suicide, right up, especially in young girls. And we as parents, we tended to be overprotective in the 80s and 90s. And now their parents are being underprotective now because they have no control over the internet. They've got 12-year-old kids looking at pornography on the internet because the parents can't stop it. Live to 100. This is kind of fun. Secrets of the Blue Zones. It's on Netflix right now as well. Gentleman spent 20 years going around 5 different spots in the world where people regularly live to over 100. They tended to be remote areas, Okanagan, Japan, an island off Greece. They tended to be places where people walked a lot, up and down hills. Again, out of this study, social interaction, close relationships. And you think about it, what COVID did to that. Because I've got relatives that I haven't seen, newborn babies, etc., because of COVID. One of my COVID projects was to write this book, Laughter from Womb to Tomb. I did this during COVID. What I've done is taken everything I've learned over 35 years and put it in a book. I can explain to you as well that I did have one of those epiphany moments delivering a baby at St. Mary's years ago. And as I was delivering the baby, I was paged on the overhead. The nurse answered it for me and came in and said, Dr. Shonk, that message was that Mr. Smith upstairs has just died and he was expected to die. And I thought, one's on the way out and one's on the way in. From womb to tomb, there was the whole thing of family practice. Key takeaways: don't postpone joy. Sharing joy doubles it. Sharing sorrow halves it. If you're happy and you tell a friend, they're happy and you're happy. If you're sorrowful and you tell a friend, they take some of that off onto their shoulders, and you will feel better. Laughter comes naturally, hate must be taught. I think we would agree. Those infants you saw laughing don't hate anybody. They have to be taught how to hate. Aspire to inspire before you expire. And it's a short leap from humor to compassion. And I throw that in. I made that one up myself. Remember that laughter can take you from moping to coping to hoping. And this is the motto at our joke junction at the hospital. A day is wasted without laughter. Nicholas Chamfort. I've heard a few chuckles here today, so I don't think we've wasted it. Always remember that there ain't much fun in medicine, but there's a lot of medicine in fun. Life is not about how many breaths we take, but how many moments that take our breath away. If you looked out your kitchen window at sunset one day and saw this, you'd say, yep, things are going to be okay. God's way of saying, have a nice day. A smile in the sky. Now, I also want to mention to you that sometimes when you're angry, look at the other side of it, and you may find yourself laughing. Best example I can give of this, the fellow who had a good friend who was opening a new store. This was a grand opening. A week ahead, he phones a florist and ordered some flowers. The afternoon of the opening, he nipped around. Of course, he looked for his flowers, and he found them, but they had a sign on them saying, rest in peace. He's not impressed. He got on the phone to the florist, and he said, it's a horrible mistake. This happy occasion. You sent flowers, and it's got a sign saying, rest in peace. Florist said, I'm sorry, sir, but there's obviously been a grave error. Please think of me. I have a phone call to come yet from the family that just buried their loved one with a sign that says, congratulations on your new location. And when he thought about it, I haven't got the problem. He's got the problem. So I hope here this afternoon that we have managed to be both playful and serious, that we have covered some of the science behind laughter, play, and joy, and made some concrete suggestions about how to bring more of that into your own lives and those you care about, that you might even consider adding the sense of humor as a true evolutionary sense, right up there with seeing, hearing, vision, etc. And it, I think, can help you in your quest for thriving in retirement. In conclusion, if laughing together is as close as you can come to a hug without touching, I hope in some way here this afternoon, we've given every one of you a great big virtual hug. Thank you very much.